The Vancouver Canucks are looking for more harmony in the locker room. The Philadelphia Flyers have a new coach and a new star player in Trevor Zegras, while the Minnesota Wild are hoping that they can lock up two of their best players long term. We've got all that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the co-host of Locked On Canucks, Trevor Beggs. And Trevor, it's been an interesting offseason for the Canucks. Let's start with Evander Kane coming to Vancouver. Your thoughts about that move and whether it makes the team better or not?
Yeah, I got to say, Gil, this has actually been one of the most polarizing trades in recent Canucks memory. And that's saying something because a lot of crazy stuff happens in Vancouver, for better or for worse, usually for worse. But I mean, my initial reaction to the Kane trade was, why? Why do you take on his cap hit? Why are you helping out the Edmonton Oilers? And again, they're bringing Evander Kane. Now they've lost Pius Suter and Dakota Joshua. Of course, more moves still to come. But even just between Kane and Suter, because that really was kind of what happened to free agency off the bat, right? They re-signed Besser and then they bring in Kane, they get rid of Suter, or he signs with the St. Louis Blues. And is this really a better hockey team with Evander Kane on it as opposed to Pius Suter? And I would probably argue no. I mean, Evander Kane, I guess he's a sexier player, more or less. You know, the brand name. He's a loud personality, to put it lightly. Pius Suter is the opposite. He's a quiet guy, elite defensive metrics, quietly put up 25 goals last year. But I think the Canucks are taking a pretty big risk with Evander Kane. They obviously wanted to change their forward makeup, but this is a team. I mean, this whole offseason, we've been screaming about fixing the center ice position, and all they did was get rid of Pius Suter and bring in Evander Kane. So, I mean, more moves come potentially in Vancouver. We'll see what Kane can do. I mean, look, 1 year left in the deal, so there's not a ton of risk. 4th round pick wasn't a huge acquisition cost. But even between Kane and Suter or Kane and Joshua, it's hard to say that the Canucks are a better team right now with bringing in Kane and losing those two guys.
One issue on the Canucks last year was chemistry in that locker room, and they'd made some moves to try to straighten it out. Do you feel right now that the chemistry is better than it was last year, or is that still an unknown for this team?
Yeah, I mean, not to pick on Evander Kane, but it is kind of ironic that the Canucks have the most dysfunctional locker room in the NHL last season, at least in the public eye. And what did they do to address that? They bring in one of the most disruptive guys in the locker room. I mean, look, he's been better at Edmonton, but this is a guy who has historically not gotten along with teammates for various reasons. So, yeah, to say that the locker room's better because now Miller's gone, but Kane's here, I don't know. I mean, everything you hear from the players, of course, is that everything's rosy in there. Everything's fine. It's a tight-knit group. I mean, for optimism for Canucks fans, the fact that Besser wanted to resign here when it looked like he was good as gone. I mean, even Besser said himself in May that he was unlikely to return. Then you get Demko extending like as soon as he could, Garland extending as soon as he could. So those are all positive signs for guys who have been together a long time and still want to play together. But yeah, just to say that the locker room's magically better because JT Miller's gone. I mean, Marcus Pettersson's definitely a good locker room guy too. We've seen the videos from him in Pittsburgh. He's definitely a leader out there. He's been a leader in the Canucks locker room. But I'm not going to come on here and say that everything's fixed and it's all good in Vancouver.
Also, talking about locker room chemistry, new coach in town. What are your thoughts about the hire, and how optimistic are you that this is going to help?
Ooh, how optimistic am I, Gil? Come on, man. It's brimming with optimism in Vancouver as always, man. Evander Kane, Adam Foote, man, it's all good. Let's go. Yeah, this one was an interesting choice. I mean, you could see the rationale from Canucks management. They clearly liked Adam Foote. He knows his team, I guess, better than any other outsider they could have brought in. But this is a guy with zero head coaching experience at the professional level. for a team that, kind of needs to make the playoffs next season, right? We all know about the Quinn Hughes noise, which has been ramped up since we last talked, I think, Gil. Everyone knows he had 2 years left in his contract, but then for Rutherford to go out and say, like, well, he wants to play with his brothers, but we could get his brothers too. I mean, he just absolutely poured gasoline on the fire there. So, it does feel like an incredibly important season for the Vancouver Canucks. And Adam Foote's got a huge, huge task in front of him. And, they brought in a pretty established assistant in Kevin Dean to run the defense. Scott Young comes back behind the bench too. Brett McLean from the AHL, although his AHL coaching record was not great. I can't say I'm brimming with confidence on this one. I mean, personally, and I'm not the only one who felt this way in the Vancouver market, it felt like it was time to give Manny Malhotra a shot. And I know they would have had to wait until the Calder Cup was finished, but Manny Malhotra, you listen to him speak, listen to Adam Foote speak, and Manny seems like an articulate, thoughtful leader. And what he did with that Abbotsford Canucks team, quite frankly, was incredible. Usually it's veteran teams that go on to win an AHL championship. That was a pretty young Abbotsford Canucks team that he led to the AHL championship. So I think Manny was probably the right guy for the job. I'm going to say that I think Foote probably has a short leash in Vancouver. Like if they get off to a rocky start, I wonder if it's a short tenure. I certainly hope that's not the case. Like, go Canucks, go! Come on, let's do it. But it's a risky hire in terms of what's been a risky offseason in terms of constructing this team.
You mentioned some more moves may be coming. There's a lot of rumors out there. What does this team need, and who are they probably looking at to try to add between now and the start of the season?
Yeah, I mean, what this team needs is elite talent, which is pretty hard to find. How's it been finding elite talent in New York? Maybe you got some this offseason though, Gil.
Well, maybe, but they're draft picks, so they're a few years away from being major contributors. But yeah. So where do they need elite talent?
That's how you got to do it for the most part, though, right? It's finding that elite talent in the draft, and finding it on the trade market is incredibly tough to do. Like, to be honest, what I think the Canucks need to do is, and they said it themselves, there's no replacing JT Miller, but you got to go, I think, acquire a guy who's maybe got that kind of upside, right? And we touched on that this week on our show, like finding the next JT Miller, finding the next Brandon Hagel. Like, who is that 26-year-old second liner who is maybe slipped off a bit and could use a change of scenery and potentially break out? Who is that 23-year-old who's around that half point a game mark and rising upwards, who you could prod of another team? And, in terms of the Miller prototype, maybe someone like Owen Tippett from Philadelphia. Got a lot of young players coming up there. He kind of regressed a bit this season. And of course, the Brandon Hagel mold to be someone like Mason McTavish, right? Who's been in rumors and apparently he's been attached to the Canucks. So the reports that the Canucks have shown interest in him, but of course, some hesitation about whether they could get a deal done. Look, it's going to be incredibly expensive to make a trade like that, whether it's finding an Owen Tippett or Mason McTavish, other names he chucked out like Alex Laferriere, maybe Alexis Lafreniere. Again, if he keeps struggling in New York, like there are guys out there who are struggling who could potentially use a change of scenery. But in terms of the Canucks this offseason, again, they cleared Dakota Joshua's cap space. They'll need to clear more if they want to bring in a guy like that. They've been tied to Jack Roslovic probably more than any other team. There are a lot of teams with more cap space than the Canucks, so I still have a little bit of hesitation, but they should be able to afford Roslovic after moving Dakota Joshua. But again, that's tinkering around the edges. I mean, you look at the Canucks roster and they got 11 guys who could probably hit 10 goals this next season, but who are the elite players on this team outside of Quinn Hughes? Hopefully one of them is Elias Pettersson, but honestly, this team needs more than that if they're going to make some noise.
Any prospects who are getting close to being NHL ready who might be able to help this year?
Oh, Gil, you know one of them very well, right? Aatu Räty. Hey,
yes,
your boy. We'll take care of him in Vancouver. But look, the way the center group is constructed right now, unless they bring in a Jack Roslovic or another middle six center, it's Elias Pettersson, who struggled last year. It's Filip Chytil, who looked good in Vancouver, but obviously has a troubling injury history. Then it's Teddy Bluger, and then it's Aatu Räty. Like, that is the Canucks center group right now. So Aatu Räty is, not only is he likely to make the Canucks next season, like he would have to absolutely lick at training camp to lose that spot. Like, there are other guys like a Nils Amon and a Max Sasson, like other AHL guys who could push him, but it's a very thin center group. So prospects who can make the jump, like Aatu Räty comes to mind immediately. And look, in fairness, he was pretty good last season, right? Like, the foot speed was a bit of an issue, but 7 goals in 33 games, 11 points, won a ton of faceoffs. He played physical. It's just, can he get to that next level in terms of his skating? And maybe even his playmaking ability too, because he showcased some of that in the AHL. So Achirachu's a guy to watch. Then on defense, I mean, the Canucks defense thankfully looks pretty damn good. DPD, aka Elias Pettersson, looked electric. I know he only had 1 goal and 3 points in 28 games, but man, oh man, like he was fast, he was physical, he was dummying guys who were like 10 years older than him. He was just a mean piece of work out there, and honestly pretty reliable defensively too. So he should get a spot in this team next season. And of course, Tom Melander, the 11th overall pick. I'm thinking Zach Benson. He still haunts my dreams a bit. The 11th overall pick in 2023. Now that he's with the Canucks, he has a good shot to make this team. He'll likely compete with Victor Mancini, who the Canucks got in the Rangers trade, who also had some good moments in Vancouver last season, probably a little bit more up and down than DPD. So those are the prospects who are likely going to jump onto the Canucks roster next season.
All right, Trevor, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you and your co-host on social media?
All right, Gil. Good as always, man. And hey, congratulations to your New York Islanders, man. That Noah Dobson trade, I was a little bit like, did you guys get enough value? But you nabbed three pretty good looking first round picks there. For Kyle and I on Locked On Canucks, again, it's some of us on the Locked On Network are down to part time, but Kyle and I still seem to be recording 5 days a week, man. We love what we do over Locked On Canucks, and Gil, as you know, for better or for worse, usually for worse, it's never a dull moment in Vancouver. So you can find Locked On Canucks on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find me on Twitter at Trev Beggs. You can find my co-host Kyle on TikTok and Instagram at Kyle Bowen, BHAWAN.
All right, Trevor, thanks so much.
As always, man.
Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You could track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And one thing I love, if you are sharing an account with a significant other or another person, Monarch Money helps put everything in one place and makes it so easy to track all of your finances. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. It is great to welcome back to the show a familiar voice and face to Locked On NHL listeners, Seth Toupal. And Seth, the Minnesota Wild, it's been an interesting offseason. Let's start with the additions. How do you feel about Vladimir Tarasenko and Sturm joining this team? And are they better than they were last year as a result?
It's interesting because I really like bringing Nico Sturm back because I think he helps solidify an area that has been a problem the last couple of seasons. Now, not directly because of the players that were penciled in to play on the fourth line, but because of all the injury issues that this team has had to deal with, and all the players that have been called up from Iowa or have been picked up via waivers to try to complete the roster. You end up with, at various points, you've got guys like Travis Boyd, Brendan Gaunce that have stepped in to play fourth line minutes, and it has led to, over the last couple of seasons, you're talking single digits in points for the guys that have played a majority of the games in that spot, which, you're not expecting a ton of production from your fourth line, but I think there's something to be said about having guys that are tried and true NHLers, which is what Nico Sturm is. And depending on how the roster plays out with some young players that I would imagine will make the team or be the first call, you're looking at least according to Daily Faceoff, a fourth line that consists of Marcus Foligno, Nico Sturm, and Yakov Trenyan, which is way better than what they have had over the last few seasons. It gives a presence, and guys that just know when they're in that role, they know what they need to do. And Sturm's a great face-off guy. He has really turned it into an area of study, which I think is going to help because the Wilds, they haven't been great in the dot like ever, other than maybe Mikko Koivu. So having a guy that really studies the art of winning faceoffs, as Nico Sturm does, I think will help everybody else. And he brings some good speed, but he also he's been right in the thick of 2 Stanley Cup playoff wins. So he got there with Colorado and won. He got there with Florida this past year and won. So he knows what it takes to get to that ultimate prize. So I think that can certainly add as well. The biggest one is Vladimir Tarasenko. And you look at the numbers at the surface, 11 goals and 22 assists in 80 games. Not great, but Detroit was terrible last year. Like they got off to the awful start. They fire their coach. They bring in Todd McClellan. They were good for like 2 weeks, and then they fizzled again. And I think he was playing more of a third line role with them and wasn't, because he is an offensive guy. Like Tarasenko is an offense-oriented player. And so having him on a third line role and asking him maybe to do a few other things other than just shoot the puck, probably not putting him in a good position to succeed. So he comes here, he'll be at least initially on the second line, and he's going to be asked to shoot the puck and score. And I think he can help in that aspect. That has been one of the biggest black holes on this team, was the second line right wing spot. So I think there's a chance that this definitely could work out. It will either be that or it's just a continued kind of slide down the mountain. But this year, I think the Wild are more equipped to be able to handle that. If he doesn't pan out, they have prospects and young players that can certainly work themselves into that spot. So they've got good options. And if these guys pan out, then this team is going to be it's going to be much deeper than it has been in previous years. And even if in the case of Tarasenko, even if he doesn't, it feels like they've got players that can step up and fill that spot as needed.
We opened with a mention of unfinished business, Kaprizov and Rossi. It's not a law firm. It is, the to-do list right now for the Minnesota Wild, 2 of their best players. Where do we stand, and how do you see these 2 scenarios playing out?
Well, not close is the word on, I guess, both players, but I'll start with the context on Kaprizov because I don't want people to, sound the panic alarms or hit the panic button or anything. Michael Russo did report the latest update was that things between Kaprizov and the Wild are not close, but we should keep in mind Kaprizov has been on vacation, so he's been in Europe. Bill Guerin was in Europe for a while as well. The expectation is that once he gets into the United States, into Minnesota, that both sides will come face to face and hammer this out. That is, I think, where a lot of the back and forth is going to come from. And honestly, the biggest issue, Gil, in this negotiation, I think, is the term. I don't think the money is a problem at all. Craig Leopold has been very adamant that nobody's going to offer more money than the Wild can, and he's right. And honestly, that just leads me down the path that there really is not a number that they're uncomfortable with. The Wild want him for 8. I feel like Kaprizov wants to go like 4, just because, you're not sure. You want to see how this team plays out and if they're going to build a legitimate contender before you up here for a lengthy contract. So I think that's the biggest sticking point. But for Kaprizov's side, he's got to keep in mind his injuries as well. Like, he played 41 games this past season. If he were to say, yeah, we're going to table this until after the season, and he gets hurt, he loses a lot of leverage that he could potentially have in the negotiations. So I think it will get done. I think it's going to be a very high number, probably highest in the league as far as AAV goes. But he's 10th in the league in goals since he came into the league back in 2021. And he's played 264 games compared to some guys that have played in the 300s. You know, William Nylander has played 327 games in that same span. So you think about adding, 60 games to that and maybe another 40 goals. Well, let's say he has 40 goals in those 60 games, or 30 goals even. That would put him to 4th on the list, behind David Pastrnak, Leon Draisaitl, and Austin Matthews. So
good company.
Yeah, he's scoring at a pace that warrants him being one of, if not the highest paid player in the league. And I think the hit of not giving him what he's asking is far worse than just paying a little bit more than you kind of are comfortable with. So ultimately, I think that'll get done. Now, on the Rossi side, I mean, where do you start? Like, the sides are not close because Rossi wants a deal similar to what Matt Boldy's getting. The Wild just do not view Marco Rossi as the same type of player as Matt Boldy. So they are far apart on term. They're far apart on AAV. Ultimately, I think they will maybe try to do something similar to what Bowen Byram got, where it's just, let's get you a deal that will get you to free agency, and we'll try to find a trade partner. But nobody else seems willing to pay that price either. Like, he's been on the block all offseason, and nobody else seems comfortable paying that sort of a price for Rossi. So this could certainly drag through the rest of the month of August, but I don't think a holdout really favors Rossi. I don't think that gives him any sort of leverage in this situation. So ultimately, I think it'll be a shorter term deal, maybe 1 or 2 years, just to get to UFA status, so that if this happens again, he can just walk. But I guess we'll wait and see.
Going to be interesting. We'll see how it all plays out. Seth, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
You can find Locked On Wild at Locked On Wild on all of your favorite social media platforms. We lucked out in getting all those socials, so just at Locked On Wild. You can also follow the show on your favorite audio platforms, YouTube, you name it, we've got it. And you can also follow me for expert Minnesota sports takes and grilling technique, grilling analysis at Seth TOUPS.
All right, Seth, thanks so much.
Thanks, Gil.
It is great to welcome my usual Friday co-host here on Locked On NHL, the co-host of Locked On Flyers, Rachel Donner. And Rachel, it's been an interesting offseason, to say the least, in Philly. Let's start with the coaching change. Your thoughts on an old Flyer coming back to coach the team?
Well, we did talk a little bit about that on the Friday show on Locked On NHL, when we talked about the coaching changes and, what the challenges ahead were for all the new coaches. And I think, it kind of set the tone for what this offseason was going to be like when John Tortorella got fired before the season ended. And the inkling was there that Rick Tocchet was a top candidate for the role, but he just had to make a decision about the Vancouver situation. Lo and behold, he decided to end things there, and Danny Briere hired him. And I think it's a good move for the Flyers. At least, you don't want the pendulum to swing too far in the other direction, right? From one coaching style to the next, because that's sometimes more of a difficult transition on your players. But I think Rick Tocchet is kind of the right kind of transition. Now, Rick Tocchet has pretty simple systems, right, that are aggressive. There's a lot of forechecking. It's a lot of use your body and your stick to be hard to play against defensively. It's nothing really like new or innovative, but he's also, like, because of his experience as a player, he's kind of a player's guy in a lot of ways. And so while he's like pretty demanding from a systems perspective, he can like manage it communication wise pretty gently in some ways, as that player's guy. So I think it should be a really fun season as far as that, to see how all of that plays out in team cohesiveness and all of that.
Is there one player in particular who you think could benefit most from this new style?
I think there's a couple. I think Matvei Michkov, first off, is going to be free to do whatever he wants in a lot of ways. I think that sort of style offensively that does not rely on dump and chase, it's a lot of forecheck. I think Matvei Michkov will thrive a lot better in that environment. And then I think there's a couple of guys who kind of got tossed around a little bit by John Tortorella in terms of benchings and stuff, that's just not the kind of discipline that Rick Tocchet does. I would say Cam York in particular, who just signed a new contract with the team, is going to be one of those guys that will hopefully benefit.
The biggest offseason addition, acquiring Trevor Zegras in a deal with the Anaheim Ducks. How important is it for Zegras to be productive, and where do you see him fitting into this lineup?
Well, I don't think that there's a doubt that Zegras will be productive. I think, he's had this sort of air of they're going to trade him for so long now that I think he's just relieved all of that's over and he can sort of play a little bit more freely. Now, also, he's in a contract year, so that will affect his production, of course, as it usually does. But I do think the biggest question there is, can he play center for the Flyers or not? I think they're banking on him being a center, at least for a good portion of the time. And given the Flyers' kind of weakness down the middle at the moment, kind of waiting for Jet Luchenko to be ready. And there's some other guys that they just drafted, but I think that whether Trevor Zegras can hang at center is going to be the biggest question.
And then obviously, speaking of his history, staying healthy.
Well, yes, that too, of course.
Here we are. We're entering the quiet part of the offseason right now. Most teams, their training camp roster is more or less set. What do you see as the biggest needs that the Flyers have as they continue this rebuild?
Well, I think that, there's been a lot of emphasis on finding a 1C for this team, and I don't know that we have that yet based on all of this, like the Zegras question. They also signed Christian Dvorak this offseason as a depth center, who I think will be hugely important in filling that role, but there still kind of isn't a 1C that we know of yet. Could Jet Luchenko become that? Sure. But we don't know. We just don't know. And I think, the other question for me, at near the top of the list is goaltending. So they have Sam Ersson, right? And then they have Ivan Fedotov under contract. Alexei Kolosov is still under contract on an NHL contract at the moment. And, our best guess is that Fedotov will stay on the NHL roster and Kolosov will get sent down to the minors, and he may decide to go back to Russia at that point, but we just don't know, right? But they did sign Dan Vladar. And so it seems pretty clear at this point that they're going to carry 3 goaltenders, which is, something, again, we talked about on Locked On NHL Friday show. Like, our team's going to just start carrying 3 goaltenders. And for this year, it looks like that's what the Flyers are going to do. But with Rick Tocchet in the mix now, we just don't know what the division of labor is going to be. First off, Sam Ersson has to stay healthy. But as of what we know right now, Sam Ersson is the number 1 with Dan Vladar as the backup, and Fedotov is there. But, things could change depending on, again, health and who's playing well and all of that. I would say, thirdly, the Flyers' blue line kind of has to play above their weight in a lot of ways. I think, Travis Sanheim is a very good defenseman in the NHL, and I think he proved himself pretty handily in the Four Nations that I think, he wasn't really expected to make the cut in terms of getting playing time, but because of injuries, he did. And I think he stepped up and played really well. He's still not an elite defenseman, I would say, in this league. I think he's very, very good, but he's just not like top tier. And do the Flyers need a top flight defenseman to win a Stanley Cup? Probably. So I think that's kind of in the back of our minds as well.
What are the realistic expectations this year for the Flyers, and how much pressure is there on the coaching staff as they come in for their first season?
I think that's one of the luxuries that Rick Tocchet and his staff have this season, because Danny Briere has done such a good job of setting expectations, and he's a little cagey about the details of the rebuild, but he has said, he said this last year, he's said it already for this year. We don't expect a huge step forward this year. It could happen if everything falls into place, but if it doesn't, we're not worried, because this year was about getting Rick Tocchet and his systems implemented, right? And then it's about making sure that we have the right center to play with Matvei Michkov, and that Matvei Michkov has a successful sophomore season. And then it'll be figuring out where the goaltending is. With that being such a huge question, like, I'm thinking the Flyers get 3 to 5 more wins than they did last year, but that's the max, I would say.
All right. So it looks like the rebuild will continue in Philadelphia. Rachel, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you and your co-host on social media?
Sure. We are at Locked On Flyers on all your basic social media sites there. That we are Locked On Flyers on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I am at our Miriam on Blue Sky. My co-host Russ Cohen is at Sportsology, pretty much anywhere as well.
All right, Rachel, thank you so much. I'll see you Friday.
Yep.
I want to thank my guest, Trevor Beggs from Locked On Canucks, Rachel Donner of Locked On Flyers, and of course, Seth Toupal from Locked On Wild for joining me today. I'm Gil Martin. I host the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, and I co-host the Friday edition along with Rachel Donner. Don't forget, we are here every day, Monday through Saturday, bringing you the biggest stories from around the hockey world on Locked On NHL. So hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you so much for watching and listening to the Locked On NHL podcast.